This year's budget, a balancing act of fiscal prudence and helping Singaporeans cope with the higher cost of living. At the budget forum, the finance minister said many measures were to support vulnerable groups.
And for a closer look, we have Associate Professor Walter Theseira. He is Associate Professor of Economics at the Singapore University of Social Sciences. Good evening, Professor Theseira. Each successive budget uses fiscal prudence as part of its priorities. I mean, there are certain other needs of society to be balanced. The minister called this one a fine balancing act, but is it any different from previous budgets? What stood out to you, and was there anything in there that was specifically remarkable?
Well, in any budget, you have to make trade-offs between competing needs. But I think what's a bit different this year is we're coming off a round of progressive tax increases, some broad-based like GST, some targeted at high-income groups like property and income tax hikes. Singaporeans are facing the real cost of our decisions to expand public spending. And of course, COVID-19 spending created this big draw in reserves that we cannot replace right now. So that's why I think it was important to take a balanced approach, as the finance minister says. We're gradually asking those who are better off to pay a bit more, but we're putting that money to good use, meeting today's social needs and also building Singapore up for the future.
But in your mind, wasn't as balanced as it could have been?
I think an important issue is this balance between short-term needs and building long-term capabilities in Singapore. In the short run, yes, we addressed the effect of high inflation on Singaporeans. We supported more vulnerable members of society. But in the long run, to prosper, we need to build our economy and society to do well in an increasingly volatile and disrupted global economy. The finance minister has talked about this. We are in the middle of this transition between a globalized economy that used to be very predictable to one where countries are taking a more conservative and nationalistic approach. Doing business as usual may not help us succeed anymore. And that's why it was important to put some money into helping businesses, helping workers meet future needs.
Professor Theseira, we saw quite a lot of support for vulnerable groups. We saw enhancements to the assurance package, some permanent enhancements as well to the GST portion of it, at least. But how far are those changes to do with perhaps promoting societal well-being at its core, not just about, spending money, on goods and services where the GST has been increased?
Well, there were, I think, two large groups we were quite concerned about, two prominent groups, lower wage workers, older Singaporeans, and they are hard hit by inflation. They don't have that room in their finances to absorb the price increase. And that's why when I look at what we've been doing with the assurance package, with expansions to the support we were already giving last year, we were trying to cover the increases in prices that they are facing. But in the longer run, we actually need to ensure as many as possible can earn their way out of this danger zone. And that's where these broader measures, long-term measures going on, expansion of the progressive wage model, our increased emphasis on skills and job matching through job skill integration in this year's budget, those must really pay off for them to be helped in the long run.
Professor, of course, as you mentioned, short-term needs, so we must help groups that need to just get by today and tomorrow. But as you said, the world is a changed world. You're looking at conservatism, nationalism, supply chains changing to safer rather than cheaper. Did we put enough money into growing the kind of workers we need, the kind of economy we need, so that, okay, for now, they need some help, but in 10 years, they will not need as much help as they need now?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I think the nature of our investments, I think, for example, to support innovation in businesses today, the nature of our, expansion of support for job skill integration, where we really want to try to maximize the value of our workers and also, help to fill the urgent manpower needs out there in the economy. These are necessarily things which will only, I think, see fruit in the medium to longer term. And it's also a continual investment that we have to make. None of these measures are things that we only started doing this year or today. They are actually refinements of our existing approach to try to expand and support workers and businesses so we are better positioned for the future.
And do you anticipate future budgets to do similarly, Professor Theseira, in that regard, in trying to balance all the various needs?
I think what's important to remember is that sometimes people, pitch it as, look, you have to spend either on society or on the economy. I don't think that's true. That is a false dichotomy. Because what's good for society in terms of protecting workers and families, upgrading skills, supporting vulnerable people, that's good for the economy. Because we have more resilient workers, more skilled workers, their basic needs are taken care of. But to do this, we need broad social support for taxes and spending that makes good use of our tax money. We don't want a situation where you tax and spend a lot, but people are not convinced the money is spent well. So I think this is actually about the social compact. It's about discussing with Singaporeans how we should spend our money, who should pay for it, how we move forward together. And I think this is just the beginning of that process. We will continue discussing that, and we may see even more changes in next year's budget.
Professor Theseira, thank you very much for your thoughts on this year's budget. Associate Professor Walter Theseira there from the Singapore University of Social Sciences.